Fire Vent Team. We are talking today with Mike Summers. Mike is Business Development Manager of Industrial Vacuum Systems for Nilfisk. Nilfisk is one of the world's leading manufacturers of professional cleaning equipment with an extensive range of floor care equipment, high-pressure washers, and vacuum cleaners. Today, we're going to talk about some of the myths people have about combustible dust. So, Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let the myth busting begin. Now, I'm going to start with one. There was no OSHA regulation about combustible dust. So if I have a company, I don't have to worry if my facility is inspected, right?
Yep. So that would be a myth. So there is no OSHA regulation, but they have handed out fines in the past, and that's according to their combustible dust national emphasis program. But they've also handed out fines, for their general duty clause too, if they feel that an environment is just very obviously unsafe.
Well, let's try another one. Myth or fact? Explosion proof is just a marketing term and it doesn't really mean anything.
So it's a myth, a little more complicated because it really just depends on the type of vacuum. So explosion proof really just means for a vacuum that is third-party certified to comply, if it's going into a hazardous location. So you wouldn't want to use explosion proof according to a vacuum that's not certified, or for a piece of equipment that's maybe a pneumatic vacuum or something like that.
All right. Well, you're on a roll. Let's see how you do with this one. Any pneumatic vacuum is safe for combustible dust.
Definitely a myth. You don't want to go grabbing any type of pneumatic vacuum to pick up combustible dust. The main thing, just like your electric, certified vacuums, you want it to be bonded and grounded. So you want to make sure that that vacuum is not creating any static electricity or any potential ignition sources that might arise from using that vacuum. So while there is, no certification or things like that, there are still some guidelines that you want to follow to make sure it's a safe option.
Now, how about this one? My facility is not classified as hazardous, so I don't have to have certified equipment. Is that a myth?
So that's actually true. And the main thing is you want to, still make smart decisions, even though you might be working with a combustible dust in a non-hazardous location. But you can, they'll still recommend, NFPA still recommends use a vacuum that's built to the NFPA standards. So still bonded and grounded and following some of those really important measures that they put in place. But it does not have to be certified.
You have no doubt worked with a lot of clients. Are these myths pretty prevalent?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of confusion out there because there's a lot of vacuums that, have ATEX certification or European certification, or they'll throw out different terms like intrinsically safe and things like that. So there's a lot of confusion out there. So, my recommendation, if you're ever confused, is to reach out, to a company like Nilfisk, or maybe someone who's doing dust tests or dust hazard analysis. There's a lot of people out there willing to help. But if you ever, when you're purchasing equipment, it's just best to have someone come out and work with you and, come understand your facility and your challenges and things like that to help you better understand the regulations.
All right, we've addressed some of the persistent myths that are out there. Now let's get to some information that will help companies deal effectively with combustible dust. Where do they start?
So first, you really just need to understand your own environment, understanding your manufacturing process, what dust you might be creating out of that process. If you don't have a dust, maybe none of this applies to you. But if you do have a dust, there's certain steps that you'll want to go after. Probably just starting off with talking to your AHJ, or what we call your authority having jurisdiction. So whoever is in charge really of making sure that you're following safe procedures. So if it's your insurance provider, if it's your fire marshal, or maybe someone within your facility as well who can help guide that process, having that discussion initially is where you should start. And really just thinking about what dust do I have? Is it combustible? And then you really, from there, it's when you start to think about, okay, we do have a dust. What regulations do we need to follow and things like that? And really starting off, the first step is just get your dust tested. And immediately that can tell you yes or no, it's combustible. And, from there, you'll have a whole lot of options. If it's not combustible, you can kind of, go on business as usual. If it is, then we advise that you get a dust hazard analysis, which is kind of the next step of looking at all your processes within that area where that combustible dust is at, and kind of pointing out weaknesses or danger areas and things like that, where you might have some potential ignition sources. So, really just tying into NFPA 654, where they're laying out the guidelines of, what you should look at for as far as keeping up with your housekeeping and things like that. Looking at the right vacuum, that's third party certified when it needs to be if it's a hazardous location. But even, the more simple things, like what OSHA recommends, just good housekeeping procedures, trying to keep your dust under 1/32 of an inch is the general rule of thumb. So making sure, to be able to go after or to do those housekeeping measures effectively, having the right type of tools to clean overhead, to clean your floors. But in addition to that, vacuum being certified using anti-static accessories, so using a lot of things that aren't going to generate any type of ignition source within that environment. And then from there, after that, it's, just reaching out, to a company like Nilfisk or another vacuum company to help, choose the right vacuum. Once you understand your environment, once you understand the regulations, have a vacuum company come out to your facility if you're, recommending that you vacuum to pick this up. Because really you want to have a really good understanding of your environment and the, the cleaning challenges that you might have. So it's not as simple as saying, I need a vacuum. Well, there's, what type of volume you're collecting. Do you have electric or do you have pneumatic? So it's really important to set up a site assessment for whoever you're working with so that you're making sure you're choosing the right vacuum for that environment as well.
That was going to be my next question. What kind of support does Nilfisk offer? And it sounds like quite a bit and quite a comprehensive analysis of the needs.
Yeah, so anytime we're dealing with combustible dust with a customer, we really, really like to get on site and see the challenges that you're having. Just because what's really important with combustible dust is just not the dust on their floor, but one of the extra risks that you have is all the dust that is overhead. So saying if you did have any type of explosion, that dust that's overhead that could potentially fall down from that first explosion, we call like a secondary risk of that potentially igniting on top of the issue, the fire, the explosion that you're already having. So it's really important with combustible dust compared to like other types of dust that you're removing all of that potential hazards from overhead as well. But site assessments, we also offer demonstrations. And then another thing that we also offer is 40-point inspections on all of our vacuums. So that's just a free preventative maintenance program that we offer just through our direct sales force. And that just involves us coming back to your facility to check on your vacuums, make sure they're being used properly, making sure no one, took plastic tools from your shop vac and brought it over to your explosion-proof vacuum. So making sure they're being used properly. But it ties into OSHA's recommendations of, your housekeeping procedures and documenting them. So that's something that we can help out with by coming by and checking on the vacuums and making sure that they're being used properly.
Now, what features do Nilfisk industrial vacuums have that make them so effective?
Mm-hmm. Well, first I'll say we've been doing this a long time. We've been around over 110 years. So it's something, that we've been doing a long time. And so, you can feel safe that we're providing high quality vacuums, when it comes down to our filtration, because, our biggest markets are food and pharma. And so filtration is really key to ensure, that we're capturing and containing that dust within the vacuum. So I'd say filtration for sure. And then also ease of use. So very easy to clean the filters, very easy to empty the containers and things like that. And also an extensive list of accessories as well to go along with the vacuum. So your vacuum sometimes is only as good as the tools you have to clean with it. And the last thing I'll say is that we put our entire vacuum through the certification process. While some companies might certify a motor or an electrical switch or things like that, we put our entire vacuums through that certification process because we feel that is the safest option.
Now, Mike, is there anything else you'd like to add about combustible dust control?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to just find trusted resources that can guide you through this process, because I think someone to come on site and not just the vacuum company, the people that would be testing your dust or the dust hazard analysis and things like that, and reaching out to these experts to help guide you, because I think there is a lot of misinformation out there, or companies who try to cut corners and things like that. So I think developing that relationship and finding someone that you can trust is probably one of the most important things that you can do. But if you are questioning, the type of equipment, things like that, probably my best recommendation is, especially if you're doing a demonstration or purchasing equipment, is just looking at the vacuum itself and looking at the data plate on there where you might find the serial number, especially if you're in a hazardous location. just make sure that it says, it meets the requirements for your environment. So that's probably one of my best tips, is just really look at the vacuum, see if it is certified for your environment. But besides that, like I said, I think probably one of my best recommendations is just having someone come on site. So reaching out and having someone physically at your facility so they can really understand what challenges you might face.
Okay, sounds good. We've been talking with Mike Summers, Business Development Manager of Industrial Vacuum Systems for Nilfisk. Now, if you would like to learn more, go to www.nilfisk.com. Thank you so much for sharing all this information with us, Mike.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Once again, that's www.nilfisk.com.